Hey everybody, Chris here again. Welcome back to the channel. Always good to have you with us. So today, we're going to be participating in Macintosh. And what's that? Well, for the month of March, a series of YouTubers are getting together and creating videos about classic Macintosh systems. This effort was pioneered by Joe's Computer Museum and Ron's Computer Videos, and others will be participating as well. So throughout the month of March, definitely check YouTube for the hashtag Macintosh. As for me, what I'm going to be covering is the ARDI Executor, which is a 608040 based Macintosh emulator emulating System 6 and System 7. So today, I'm going to take you on an Executor tour, and we'll also show you how to set this up in a virtual machine, as well as how to install an application. Spoiler alert, installing external applications is not particularly trivial, but I'll show you at least one way to do it, maybe not the best way, but my way. From there, we'll show you Executor on modern hardware like Windows 10 systems, and then we're going to have a discussion of a day in the life, where I will take you through a situation where we can use Executor to get some work done. So you'll definitely want to stick around for that. In any event, let's get to it without further ado. So let's start with a tour. Let's take an executive tour of Executor. First, you see the nice splash screen, followed by this bathroom tile background, and we can see the initiation of Executor. Over on the left, we have the system volume, which has some demoware, freeware, shareware, and system folders. And the demoware, freeware, and shareware folders are automatically expanded when you first launch Executor for the first time. Across the top, we are currently in the application view, where you can see various applications are installed and available to launch. They can also be launched from the folders below. If we click over to the Volumes tab, we can see the different volumes, including Drive C, which is kind of cool because we can pull items from Drive C into the Executor. And there's various other icons. We've looked at apps. There's fonts, recent documents, folders, as well as helper applications, I believe, as well. We can go ahead and let's launch the help here so we can see the different items and understand what's available to us. So we have folders, fonts, desk accessories, volumes, and documents that are used frequently. So that's what that's all about. And here you can see some other options related to help. And next up, we can go look at the actual browser concept itself. So everything we're seeing here is the browser. I guess it's similar to what Finder would be. And we can go do an about as well, and you'll see that this is Executor version 2. And we have about 13 megabytes of emulated RAM with a little bit of system RAM free and some application RAM as well. So there's that. Moving on, let's look at some of the applications. Let's start with this speedometer application. It looks pretty cool. So here we can see we're running a 608040 CPU. How about that? And you can see our memory count and a 128K ROM size. And here you can see we've got a 640 by 40 depth. Here you can see we're running System 607. And here you can see that lots of items aren't present in the Mac OS, as not surprised since we are emulating here. Next up, we've loaded the TextEdit text editor, which is kind of a cool little editor, and I'm going to attempt to do some typing here and do a pretty poor job at it. And next, I've launched the texture installer, and we can pop over and choose the most hideous background image possible. So there you have it. Next, I want to launch the Mac Breadboard app. And I think for anything, downloading Executor just to see this is well worth it. Look at this cool little app. Let's go ahead and turn things on here. And you can see the decade counter moving on the right there. If we speed things up, we can see this little decade counter starts to speed up. But yeah, you can design things, you can flip switches. Maybe you can take 5 volts and put it directly to ground. I'm not sure what would happen if you did that. Maybe your Executor would explode. But from there, we can go ahead and end the simulation, and I'll pop out. But this is definitely worth exploring if you install Executor. Next up, we're going to have a look at a classic game, Lemmings. I'll go ahead and click through this. You can see the startup screens here. And from there, we can launch into the game. And I'll be quiet a minute so that you can enjoy the sound in its full glory. Once we click the mouse to begin, the game will start. Now, worth noting, there's a little bit of sound distortion. I think that's because of the emulator that I'm running this in. On real hardware, it sounds better. Next up, let's have a look at Eric's Ultimate Solitaire demo. And you can see I'm not a particularly good solitaire player, so we'll jump out of here. Next, let's look at Stuffit Expander. And I don't have anything to expand, but if we go to the order info, we can see we've got a really old version of this. Well, let's go ahead and jump out of here. Next, let's look at this globe app that's on the system. And it pretty much spins around. I think you can control it and slow it down, but that's about the extent of it. And finally, let's look at this Compact Pro app just to launch it. This looks like some sort of a disk compression tool. Nothing more exciting than that, so we'll go ahead and pop out of here for now. Those are the apps. Let's talk about virtual hardware setup. First of all, I did download Executor 2.0 for MS-DOS off of archive.org. There is a zip file there. And from there, I launched PCEM and went ahead and configured a new virtual machine. We'll go ahead and call it Executor. And I want to choose a machine type that will let me boot from CD-ROM, so I chose this Asus motherboard you see here. And that gives me a nice Pentium 75. I don't need 128 megs of memory, so I backed it off to 28. Set the display to a Cirrus Logic controller and the sound card to a Sound Blaster 16. And from there we can create a virtual hard disk by clicking this button here. And I'm just going to put a file on the desktop so that we can access it later and open it in WinImage. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and click OK here, and it's time to launch the machine. Now the first thing I'm going to do is go into the BIOS and actually change the boot order. You can see the boot sequence is already CD-ROM CA for me. You can use page up and page down to change it, and then save and exit. I had been in there previously when I had done a previous machine and it kept the settings. From there we can load the DOS 622 boot CD-ROM, and we'll boot DOS 6.22. And I'll go ahead and run the fdisk program like I do in other videos you've probably seen me do, and we'll create a primary partition and set it active. Reboot again. And now we can format that partition and apply the /S option so that we also can boot this partition. Once formatting completes, we now have a nice bootable partition. We're going to go ahead and close PCEM, and we're going to inject some files into the image that we created for our PCEM hard drive. We'll use WinImage for that. And I want to basically inject a couple of things. First, we'll go ahead and inject a mouse driver because we're going to need that. And next, we'll make a couple of folders. First, I'll make one for the Executor application itself. And we'll go ahead and make one for the MS-DOS installation as well. I have MS-DOS already installed. We're just going to copy over that installation. From there, we can inject the Executor folder, as you see me doing here. And we can inject the MS-DOS folder. And these inject all the files under that folder. That's why I created the folders first. And from there, let me just double check. And I think we got everything, so we can go ahead and exit WinImage and relaunch Executor via the PCEM, I should say. And now we can go ahead and edit config sys. We need to add a couple of lines, except, I didn't boot from drive C. More on that in a minute. So we need to set files equals 30 in config sys, as well as load a HiMem sys memory driver. I don't know if that's required, but I think it's a good thing to do. From there, we can save config sys and also edit autoexec.bat. And what we're going to do here is basically add one line, actually 2 lines. First, we need a path statement. Otherwise, executor won't start, and then ctmouse. Great. Yeah, that path statement's a weird requirement, but it is something I came across. So I just set it to drive C. Just something has to be defined. All right. So from here, I forgot to eject the CD-ROM drive, or the CD-ROM, so it went ahead and booted up with it again. So I ejected it and started over again. And now we can go ahead and run Executor. Look at that nice splash screen. And we're in. Perfect. Oh, so another thing you're going to want to do is configure sound. To do that, you can do an Alt-Shift-5, change sound to on, and hit save. So let's look what it takes to install an application. And I've chosen this cheesy writing program called the Writing Center that I used back in high school when I was using Macs back then. And to do this, what we're going to do is create an HFV file, as you can see here. And this is a type of image file that will be used under Mac OS. And you can actually use a program called Make HFV, which is bundled with Executor. However, we're going to take a slightly different route and use a special Explorer program called HFV Explorer to create our image. So I went ahead and downloaded that. And then from there, I put a shortcut on my desktop that we could launch. And I'm going to format or create a new volume. We'll just call it my vol. Change the size to 30 megabytes. And change the path to be on the desktop for ease of finding later. You'll see why. Okay. And now what we're going to do is navigate to my downloads directory and find the Writing Center Stuff It Expander file. And we can see it there. And I'll drag that to my vol. Now, once this is complete, we actually need to go and change the type permissions on the file in order for it to actually work. So we'll go to Properties and change the type to be sit, exclamation point, and the creator as well, though I think that's less relevant. Perfect. Now from there we can close that. And we can go ahead and open the WinImage hard drive image for our PCEM virtual machine. Go to the Executor directory and inject this HFV file. Any HFV files that live in the Executor directory will automatically be detected on Executor startup. Great. So now let's go ahead and launch PCEM and launch our Executor virtual machine. And let's start up Executor. And let's go ahead and navigate to the Volumes tab. And you see my volume there, so perfect, it was detected. Let's double click on that Stuff It Expander file. And from there we can expand it. So we'll just go ahead and choose Open. And you'll see it's unstuffing. Perfect. And now that it's finished, we can exit Stuff It Expander. And we have a new file called writingcenter.img. Or I guess the writingcenter.img. Let's double click on it. Nothing happens. Let's go look at it. It's of type DImage. Well, here's where I punt and actually use a different emulator to get this in shape. And we're going to use this emulator here called Basilisk. And what I did is I downloaded and installed it. And I'm going to go ahead and remove this past reference to a volume. And what I'm doing is I'm adding this my vol that we created a few minutes ago that's on the desktop. Remember how I said I wanted it to be in a convenient place? That's why. So we'll click OK. Now we can click Start. This will launch. And what we're going to do is launch my vol, which we see mounted here, and find that Stuff It Expander file. And I've actually installed Stuff It Expander in my virtual image here. And once that finishes, you'll see that we get on the desktop this icon that is a disk image. From there, I'm going to take everything that you see that pops up in that and drag it over to my vol. Okay, Now we can shut this down. And the next thing we need to do is re-inject this HFV file back into our image. So once again, it's WinImage again, into the Executor folder, find the file, inject it, yes, replace it, close, and relaunch PCEM with our Executor virtual machine. And you can see we now have my vol with the Writing Center. Perfect. So we can run it, we can personalize it, we can see it try and start. Excellent. So I'm just going to take a shortcut for the Writing Center and drag it up to the shortcuts bar because I can, and now you can see, like all the other happy applications, we also have it listed up there. Perfect. Let's have a look at what it takes to install Executor on modern hardware. And I'm going to go to the Macintosh repository for this. And I'll make a note of the serial and authentication key, which we are more than free to use. And we can download ARDI Executor for Windows. And you can see that listed here. So once I download it, we'll navigate to that download directory and double click on it and run the setup program. And this is your typical next, 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 as it always goes. And you can see I already have a directory because I had this installed earlier. Don't sweat it, it's fine. And we'll click Finish. And we'll close the README because whoever reads the directions. Okay. Now to launch this, I'm actually going to launch it in administrative mode. You can see it put a nice shortcut on my desktop. See the nice splash screen? Now we get to personalize it, so we can go back to that web page and grab the serial number and authentication key. You'll see I grabbed the serial number the hard way. And then I get a little bit smarter, but not much. And I actually drag this over so I can type that nice long authentication key in. So there you have that. Click OK. Of course it's going to restart. So once again, I'm going to right click and say Run as Administrator because it's safest. It may not be required at this point. And we'll see it launch. And that looks very familiar to what we saw a minute ago in the virtual machine. Outstanding. So something else I'm going to do is, as I noted, if you put a HFV file in the same directory as Executor, it'll find it. So I've copied that over to the program files location for Executor. And now I've relaunched it. And if we go up here to the file location, you can see that my vol is also present. And if we click on that, we have, once again, the Writing Center. So for our day in the life experience, what I'm going to be showing you is writing a term paper using the Writing Center. And don't worry, we won't write a full term paper. That would bore you to tears. But what we will do is we'll simulate starting out writing our term paper on a desktop machine, and then furthermore moving to a laptop machine, and show you what that process looks like using the infamous and trusty floppy disk. So let's have a look. So here we are on my beloved 486DX4100, where we're going to start the editing process. And since we're going to be eventually transferring this over to our mobile laptop, I need to tell Executor to check for a floppy disk. And once it finds it, we can see it gets put up here in our list of volumes. If I double click on it, we can see that there's nothing on the disk. Perfect. Let's go ahead and launch our editor, the Writing Center, which is right here on the toolbar. Can you imagine having to wait every single time you wanted to do your editing for a jingle like that to play? I'm so glad that that died in the 90s, but I digress. Anyway, so moving on, we can choose a report or letter, and I'm going to say no heading. And from here, we can start our typing. This is the beginning of my wonderful term paper that we will continue on the mobile device. And I feel like it wouldn't be a term paper if we didn't put some sort of a picture in here. Unfortunately, though, our image file is damaged, so we're not going to be able to do that possibly. Then again, we'll see. Looks like it's going to work just fine. How about that nice picture of a house or a playground or a police car? Yeah, that's nice. Or maybe a shopping mall. Wow, we've got all kinds of great pictures in here. Let's go with the shopping mall because that's like germane to a term paper. So let's put that in here. Oh, that's just beautiful. Look at that. I like how the text wraps to the right. Well, that's enough for now. What kind of car is that? Is that kind of like a Ford Ranchero or something? I don't see like doors in the back. Maybe it's a pickup truck that's like low to the ground, maybe a lowrider. Anyway, I digress. Focus, Chris. Let's go ahead and save this. And let's go ahead and save it on the floppy drive. And let's call it the truck term paper because I don't know what else to call it. And we'll click save. Sometime later, the file is saved, and we can now exit the application and proceed to do our editing on the mobile device. Sometime later, we find ourselves on our compact LTE 5000 laptop, which also has Executor on it and the Writing Center. So similarly, let's go and check for a disk. And from there, we can see, hopefully, that we have a volume up here. Indeed, we do. Let's go ahead and launch the Writing Center. All right, from there we can open a saved document and change over to our disk drive and open up the truck term paper. And with that, we can continue on with our truck goodness. And as an aside, my little Pentium 120 compact LTE seemed to load this much faster than my DX4 from disk. So there's that too. All right, well that's what we had for you today. Hope that you enjoyed it. It was certainly fun for me to go back and revisit the ARDI Executor and actually do more with it today than I did back in the day. Definitely consider subscribing to the channel. If you're a Mac enthusiast, you may not see too much Macintosh content here, but you never know. We may find some other things to look at in the future. Ring that notification bell and you'll be notified when new content is available. If you liked what you saw, please do consider giving me a thumbs up. That helps me out quite a bit. If not, consider sending me a strong message by pressing that thumbs down button twice. As always, it's been great having you along for the journey. A very special thanks to those who have put together this effort of Macintosh. I look forward to seeing your videos, and that's what we have, so we'll see you later. Bye.